This is part 8 in my guide to the mechanical raid team, and in this one I'll be taking a look at the first side boss of the series, and that is Nauseous Rotbone. The mechanical team isn't only just good for a slew of the main bosses in the game, but also they do fare very well against certain side bosses, and Nauseous Rotbone is one of those. And a lot of that is down to his traits, specifically the boss adjutant trait, which makes him take 2/3 reduced damage from all sources. However, he can take 5,000 damage 15 times per turn for each time that he is attacked. And there aren't really any other sort of mainline raid teams that are capable of dealing 15 attacks per turn. There are other ways, I guess, of spamming lots of summons at him to get those 15 attacks out, but the mechanical raid team is already kind of a cohesive team that is built around dealing lots of attacks, so instead of using some kind of ad hoc made up team with a lot of summons, you might as well actually use, I guess I'd facetiously call it a proper team. Thankfully, Nauseous Rotbone, he doesn't really have any extra traits for his boss battle that I have to really spend a lot of time going through, except for this boss adjutant thing. However, the other one that can be quite annoying is his passive ability. And the reason that this is annoying, especially in this case, where he's quite a high level, is that he can revive an adjacent ally that's killed with 4,000 health, which is not an inconsiderable amount. Especially when you're looking at the Terminators. So they start off with 6,000 health and with 1,147 armor, and they also negate 75% of the damage of the first attack that hits them per turn. So you're going to have to pile a lot of damage onto them to kill them, and then if Rotbone is next to them and he revives them, you're then going to have to work through another 4,000 damage on top of that with a high level of armor to get through, and they have their resilient trait as well, which you'll have to potentially get through twice if you don't manage to overkill them. So these guys can very quickly sort of start sucking up a lot of attacks from your characters, from your summons, and for every turn that you're not getting any attacks on Rotbone, you're missing out on potentially 75,000 damage up to that from his boss adjutant trait alone, not let alone actually just hitting him for damage. And granted, even though he takes 67% reduced damage, you can still actually pile on quite a lot of damage onto him with the mechanical team, just through sheer force alone. So you don't want to be missing out on an opportunity to do that too. So I guess the main thing here is to get as many summons out as possible, as quickly as possible, which is always the way of the mechanical team. And you also want to take out all of the summons, all of the boss adds as quickly as you can. And there's a reason I've already stated for that, which is Rotbone's passive ability reviving the Terminators and really sucking up lots of attacks. And also, I'm going to be using Scarab Swarms. The thing about Scarab Swarms is that they can take up to 5 hits. It takes 5 hits from an attack to kill them. And Rotbone deals 4 hits. So Rotbone on his own, if he's going up against Scarab Swarms, he cannot kill a Scarab Swarm in a single attack. However, if a Scarab Swarm has taken a bit of damage from another enemy first, like a Poxwalker dealing 2 hits or a Terminator dealing 3, Rotbone can then come in and finish it off. And if he's able to finish off a Scarab Swarm, he may prefer to do that instead of doing what I want him to do, which is to kill biovore mines. And I'm essentially going to lay a trail for him to follow of biovore mines to lure him into a location that I want him to be in, so I can then surround him and really lay down a lot of attacks on him. So the idea is early on, get lots of summons out, make sure my scarabs don't get injured so that they can start distracting him, make sure that he is separated from the Terminators so that he can't revive them, and then also make sure that at the beginning of the second turn, I finish off the Terminators before he can start getting distracted by healing them instead of just attacking the biovore mines like I want him to. It's a lot of ground to cover, but I think the technique I came up with here is a good way to do all of those things at once. And I may have made a few mistakes, but the general principle of it all is sound. And the few mistakes I made were fairly minor and could just be fixed just by little tweaks to the method, but the underlying main method I think is good. So I'll get started now. First thing to do is get the Skitari out. Now here I want I want a Skitarius to spawn where this Poxwalker is. So if I kill this Poxwalker first, then the first Skitarius will spawn here. And then if I kill this Poxwalker, the second one will spawn here. So I will not have a Skitarius spawning on the hex I want it to if Tan doesn't kill the Poxwalker that I have selected here, if he doesn't kill that one first. So when you're doing this, make sure that you use Tan's attack rather than Axis's heal first, because with Tan's attack, obviously you can choose who he attacks, and you want him to attack this northern one. So manually kill that one, then do the heal so that he kills the southern Poxwalker, and then you have the Skitarius spawned where you want him. And I've moved Ro into this position. Now for this Terminator, the weakest target that it has that it will have in range at the end of my turn will be this Skitarius in the trench. And the only place it can move to hit this Skitarius is this hex here. And if it moves into this hex, at the beginning of the next turn, it will be adjacent to Ro. So these Skitari will attack the Terminator and trigger Ro's passive and deal a lot of damage to the Terminator, which will help to then swiftly finish it off in the next turn. Now the positioning here is also important. So I've moved Elgion onto this hex because I am predicting that the Terminator will move forward 2 hexes into the safety of the trench here, and also it won't move into this position despite it being a trench and therefore quite safe, because moving here will get it closer to its targets. So if it moves here, it will be afflicted by Doom, which means that when the Scarab Swarms, which I'll be deploying on this Poxwalker, take their action and attack the Terminator that's standing here, they'll be doing increased damage against it because they're being helped by Elgion's Doom, which is giving them an extra 765 damage per hit. So that also will help to whittle down the left-hand Terminator's health considerably. So I've got this one. In the next turn will be hit by Ro and probably take most of its health away. Not kill it necessarily, but make it very easy to kill. This one will have been hit a couple of times by Scarab Swarms and will have lost the protection of its Terminator armor, which will make it easier to finish off with my characters. Now there's just a question of what to do with Rotbone. So I don't want him adjacent to either of the Terminators. So I don't want him here, or here, or here, or here. So what I do is I put a Spore Mine into this hex, so that neither of the Terminators can move to it and kill it. The only one who can move to it and kill it is Rotbone. And of course he will move to it and kill it, because as we kind of know from the general AI of enemies in this game, they will tend to prefer to go for things that they can overkill. And Rotbone obviously isn't going to be able to overkill Ro when he's in the trench, and yeah, that's the only target he'll have aside from the Spore Mine. So he's basically guaranteed to end up in this hex here after I've placed my Spore Mine. Now we'll see that all play out. So the Spore Mine's been hit, Terminator gets hit twice by Skitari and gets pasted by Ro's passive, and this Terminator has lost 2,200 health, so about just over a third of its health. So it's all gone very nicely. Now it's the time to finish off the Terminators before they can before Rotbone can start healing them up and making them a problem. You really don't want them bunching together. So what I'll do is move Tan here. Now, I'll trigger him with Actus, and his attack should finish off the Terminator. I think what I maybe should have done instead was leave Tan here, trigger him with Actus, because he could still spawn a Skitari into this hex here. Tan would shoot the Terminator, Ro would finish the Terminator off with his passive, and then I'd be free to move Tan from the hex here to sort of somewhere over here rather than where I move him to in the replay. So this, I think, was a mistake. I shouldn't have moved him here because he ends up spawning a Skitari up here, a Skitarius up here, and a Skitarius up here. Whereas Rotbone ends up down here, which means that down here. So it means that the Skitari have quite a long trek to kind of get over to him and start shooting at him, and that delays some of the damage that I could have been getting onto Rotbone. If I'd had a Skitarius spawn here and then spawned another one sort of around here instead, then it would have been easier for them to get into good positions early on in this battle and start contributing a bit better. Nevertheless, it's only a small style point, not too much to worry about. Of course, the good thing about moving Tan here as well is that he can finish off the Terminator, but Rotbone is still in range of him, so he can spawn a second Skitarius in this turn. But before I do that, I move Ro next to Rotbone so that when Tan shoots him, I'll get an extra attack on Rotbone from Ro's passive. Just a little bit of extra damage. So at this point, the Terminator, if I hit it with Ro's melee attack and Eldrion's attack, there was a good chance that it would die, but I wasn't entirely certain that that would be able to finish it off. And I didn't want Ro to move into the hex that the Terminator is currently standing in, because I didn't want Rotbone to kind of have anywhere that he might get distracted. Essentially, I'm putting a spore mine where Aleph is, and I didn't want him to kind of... I guess the worry was unfounded, but I still didn't want him to have a path to go down that wasn't just straight to the spore mine. So I didn't want Ro to move into the hex that this Terminator was in. Also, if Ro moves into this trench and Rotbone moves here, in the next turn, Scarab Swarms could surround Rotbone and then block Ro from moving into the high ground. Of course, with the way things are, I'd have Aleph on the high ground here, but that means Ro would only have one option, one high ground option to move to, and I prefer to give him more options. So what I do here is I attack with Aleph first and get Ro to hit the Terminator with his passive attack. That doesn't kill the Terminator, and then I finish the Terminator off with Ro. And that way, Ro doesn't move into the trench. I think, again, I could have played this better. So I finish it off with Ro, and then I move Eldrion here to attack Rotbone. What ended up happening was I actually needed Eldrion to block off one of these two hexes here. You'll see why later on. But because I move him here, it takes me too long to get him over to this area of the map. And I end up suffering some potential damage loss as a result. So I think what I should have done here was finish that Terminator with Eldrion's ranged attack and then attacked Rotbone with Ro instead. But instead I attack Rotbone with Eldrion. And there we go, I've put the spore mine there, so the only way Rotbone can get to it is by moving onto this low ground position, which will be both doomed and adjacent to Ro. So at the beginning of the next turn, when my summons all start attacking Rotbone, Ro will instantly be able to start capitalizing on his passive ability and dealing a lot of damage from high ground onto Rotbone. So you see the problem of this Skitarius being spawned up here is that because of the barbed wire and this Skitarius standing here and this Skitarius standing here, it doesn't actually have anywhere it can go to where it can shoot Rotbone from. So instead of going onto the barbed wire, it goes into the trench for a little added protection, but that actually ends up hurting it again later on, because that means it doesn't have anywhere it can move to in the next turn either. So this Skitarius spends quite a long time just sort of waiting around, not actually doing anything, which could have been avoided. So I moved Actus here because it's high ground relative to Tan, so I knew that if I activated Tan with Actus's heal, and I had Actus on this hex, Tan would have spawned the Skitarius onto the hex where Actus currently is. But because I've moved Actus here, the next highest priority place for him to put a Skitarius is onto this low ground hex. And at this low ground hex, Rotbone is within range of the Skitarius. So now I can get 4 attacks against him with Conqueror mode. And of course it's fine to switch to Conqueror mode because I have all of my Skitarius spawned. Now what I should have done here is move Eldryon onto the barbed wire. And the reason for this is this Skitarius is on low ground, and it would rather be on high ground to shoot Rotbone from. Skitarii are kind of stupid like this. They will move to high ground, preferentially over low ground. Even if they stayed on low ground, they'd be next to Tan, and you'd actually be able to get more damage out of them over the course of a turn. And that's because their AI is just very simple. It just sees, oh, high ground, I'll move to the high ground, do more damage. And they don't sort of give any consideration to the fact that that's actually a worse option for your team as a whole. It's just better for them as an individual unit, so that's what they do. So if I'd moved Eldryon up here, I could have put a Spore Mine here, and then that would have completely blocked the Skitarius from moving to any high ground hexes, and it would have just stayed in place next to Tan. And I could have spent the rest of the battle with Tan having four mechanical summons around him and getting the maximum possible number of extra hits out of them. But instead, things go a bit awry. I say a bit awry. I don't think it would be possible to actually beat Rotbone in a single battle here, and I do take more than half of his health in total, so even with the minor mistakes I'm making, at the end of the day it didn't actually matter at all, because it was always going to take 2 attacks to bring him down. However, you know, just for the sake of improvement, for the sake of, I guess, a thinking exercise, there are definitely ways of looking at this and thinking, oh yeah, I could have done this better. Just the simple fact that I'm not getting extra high ground damage from Eldryon, as small as his damage output might be. You know, if I'd moved him onto the barbed wire, it's still damage that I'm missing out on. Just something to think about. But I see the problem, so I preemptively put a Spore Mine here now to stop. Now this means that this Skitarius, the only place it can move to from where it currently is, where it can shoot at Rotbone, is onto this hex here that I have selected, the one that's next to Tan. So now I'm thinking, okay, I can have that Skitarius locked in place there now, and it was a bit annoying having this Skitarius run off, but he'll be replaced by the other one, so it's not too much of a problem. And as usual, it's just a lot of attacks to sit through. Of course, doesn't matter if the Scarab Swarms die because there are plenty to replace them as well. So no need to kind of worry yourself thinking, oh, I need to start manoeuvring Aleph around to heal the swarms up. It's fine. So 2 rounds left. Looking like my prospects are good for getting lots of attacks from summons, so I use Rose active and start hammering away at the boss. But I make a mistake again. I should have learnt the lesson from this Guitarius running off, but I didn't. So again, I leave this high ground hex empty, and I think maybe in the back of my mind I was thinking, oh, this Guitarius won't want to move onto it because it's barbed wire, which summons generally don't like moving onto, but their consideration that they want to be on high ground to deal more damage kind of overrides the consideration of the barbed wire being dangerous to move onto. So the Guitarius moves from the low ground onto the high ground, and I should have blocked off the high ground with either Eldrion or a Spore Mine, preferably Eldrion, but I didn't. So again, at the end of this turn, this Guitarius moves off, and I only have 3 mechanical summons around Tan again. And once again, a lot of attacks, and you can see soon I'm no longer getting the 5,000 extra damage from hitting the boss. So I've already done 15 attacks and I haven't even done anything with any of my characters yet. It just goes to show how crazy the number of attacks you can get with the mechanical team is. So to finish off, I put Actus into this hole here just so I can activate this Scarab Swarm with his active ability as well as Tan. And despite all of my kind of looking back and in hindsight realising my mistakes, I'm quite happy with the aesthetically pleasing perfect hexagon I formed around Rotbone at the end of this battle. So, although I could have done better in terms of damage output, I think in terms of style points, this was definitely a win. But yeah, not much more to say at this point. Just a case of really annoying that I didn't block off these 2 high ground hexes earlier on to stop these Skitari from running off, but I certainly won't be making that mistake again, because it has been thoroughly pounded into my head by hindsight. And that is quite a good chunk of damage. I think that is all I have to say on that one.